Okay. Okay, today's a nice stuff. Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph. Tzadik Zayin on Masechta Baba Basra. Okay. So what we're discussing over here is really what bracha do you make on something, and there's something called a drink called temed. I don't know what the word. Come on, we'll learn that word temed, which means you take the junk from after you make wine. Let's say you're left over with seeds and peels and stem, and so let's say you have all this junk in a little container. If you pour water over it, that water absorbs the taste of wine somehow. So the Gemara had a machlokes before, and we're going to discuss this even more. What is that water that comes out? It's almost like flavored seltzer, like if so something like that. This flavored water has a din like wine. So the Gemara says, really, normally it has a din like water, and you would make a shahakol. However, if you poured, let's say, 3 cups of water over this wine mass, over this grape, junk mass, and out comes 4 cups of water. So then everybody agrees, the Gemara says, that since 4 cups of water came out, some wine that was still left in the grape junk came out, and now you have a concentrated wine mixed with 3 cups of water, which is real wine. So then you would make a bar priya gafen. But if anything less than that came out, let's say you poured 3 cups of water over that wine junk, and only 3.5 cups of water came out. I don't know, where did the half water come from? It must have been part of the junk. So then that's a machlokes between the Tanakama of the Brisa that says you make a shahakol, and Acherim say you make a bayre priya gafen. So the Gemara concludes over here. If you get more than the 3 cups of water out of the grape seeds, out of the grape mixture, after pouring it up, you get more than 3 cups. Is there a machlokes whether it's wine or water? Well, now we learned in the Mishnah. We go to Amid Tzadik Zayin Aleph. Hamasmid, Hamasamid, someone who makes temed, like I explained, you pour v'nosa mayim b'mida, and out comes exact amount of water. That means he had meiser, let's call it meiser sheni, grape waste, and he poured water over it, and out comes the same amount of water that he poured on top of it came out from the strainer, same amount of water. So he poured a certain amount of water. So now what is that water? Is that water a din of meiser of not? So let's read it inside again. Hamasame, someone who's trying to make temed. So he v'nosa mayim b'mida, he put a certain amount of water over those grape waste. Umatza kedei midase, and he found coming out from the other side is exactly the amount of water that he put in, but that water now tastes like grapes, right? Potter. That water is potter from drinking it in Yerushalayim because it's not meiser sheni, right? Rabbi Yehuda says machayev. Rabbi Yehuda would obligate you to take that water and drink it in Yerushalayim because he held that is considered to be like wine. That's really the meiser sheni. So ad kan loy pligi ella b'chdei midase. The only machlokes between. Hi, Sheldon. We just began. We're in Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph, and we're up to almost a new.
Okay, thank you.
Ad kan loy pligi ella b'chdei midase. The only argument is only if you poured in a certain amount of water and you got the same amount of water outside of it. Avol b'yoyse b'chdei midase. If you get a little bit more water, if you find you put 3 cups of water and you got 3.5 cups of water, loy pligi. There's no argument, and everybody would hold that it has a din of wine and has a din of meiser sheni, and you would have to eat it in Yerushalayim. So you just told me that no, if it's a little bit more, if you get, as long as you don't get 4 cups, but if you get like 3.5 cups, the Tanakama holds that it's still considered water, and it's only the Acherim who would consider it wine. So the Gemara says, Huadin, it would hold true. Answers the Gemara, Huadin, it would hold true. Dafilat b'yosef mikdei migdasai pligi. They're arguing, Rabbi Huda and the Rabbanan would argue, even if you got a little bit more water out than you put in, even the Tanakama would still hold its shahakol, or still hold its potter from Maisid. Why are they arguing exactly if you put in the precise amount, three cups of water, and then you got 3 cups of water? And that's where the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. If the Chachamim would hold that even if you got 3.5 cups, it would still be potter from Maisa. Why did he say the machlekes is u'motza kedei midasa? You got the exact amount out with the exact amount of water that you put in. And says the Gemara, and that's where ends this piece of Gemara. To teach you the power of Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda says that you put in exact amount of 3 cups of water, and what strained out of this mixture was another 3 cups of water. It still has a din of wine. It still has a din of Maisa Sheni wine. It would be obligated to drink it in Yerushalayim. Obviously, nothing came out of the grape waste, and nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda, since it got the taste of wine in this water, it has a din of Maisa Sheni, and you would have to drink it in Yerushalayim. So the Gemara asks a question, and this is like the Gemara is like a new Gemara, but it's really related to the Gemara that we said before, but they didn't know of the Gemaras that we said before. So let's read it inside. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Chia bar Avim. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak asked the question of Rav Chia bar Avim. Here it is. Again, the same idea. You have the grape waste, right? The grape seeds, the grape peels, and the stems. All after you made wine, you cleaned it up and you put it into a strainer, and you poured water over it to try to make water flavored with this grape waste. So the water should taste like grapes. Does that water have a din like wine that you would have to make a barit priagafen? That's the question. Shmarim sheyesh behem tamayim yayin mahu. If you have water that was made to have the flavor of wine, does it have a din like wine or not? Do you have to make a bar priagafen or not? Amalei. So Rav Chia bar Rava answered, "Mi savret chamrahu. Do you think it's wine? Kihu ba'almahu. It's just a taste. It's just a taste, a passing flavor. It's a flavor, but it's not real wine that you would make a bar priagafen." That's the conclusion of the Gemara. Now the Gemara goes still with this idea, this topic. Same idea. Shmarim shel truma. Let's say you have the grape waste is from truma, right? And you're pouring water over it, and what out comes is water. It's flavored with the wine, with the grapes of truma, water flavored from the grapes of truma, from the grape waste of truma. So rishain v'sheni, the first time you pour water, the first batch of water that you make from this process. The sheni, on the second batch of water that you make from this process, aser, that has a din of truma, and a non-kohen is not allowed to eat it. It's a chumrah, right? Maybe even if you consider it water, but it's like we consider it like water of truma, and only a kohen should eat it. Shlishi, the third time you're using the same grape waste, so obviously the flavor is very weak in the water, so therefore mutter, then a regular Yisrael can drink that water. Rav Meir says, Af shlishi b'noisen tam. If the third time you did the process with the same grape waste and it still tastes a little bit like from grapes in the water, so then it has a din like truma, because you're using truma waste, and therefore it would still be usher to a non-kohen to drink it. Vishal meiser, but if it's meiser rishon, meiser sheni, okay, let's go meiser sheni, which is supposed to be eaten in Jerusalem. So Rishon, the first water that comes out of this process, usher, then you're not allowed to eat that outside Yerushalayim. Sheni, but the second time of this process, you're mutter to eat it outside Yerushalayim. It's not Maisa Sheni water. Rav Meir is more strict. Av Sheni b'noisen tam. Even the second time you did it, it's considered Maisa Sheni, and you have to treat it like Maisa Sheni. V'shel hegdish, but if it's hegdish, let's say it was the grapes that you made wine for libations on the mizbeach. So whatever it is, it had a din of hegdish. So then shlishi also, even if you did it 3 times the process, it has a din of hegdish. That water is aser. Uravi mutter, but the 4th time you did it, then it's water and it's permitted. Rab Meir says, Af Revi, even the fourth time you do it, B'nais and Tam, it's still, as long as you can flavor it with it tastes like grapes, then it still has a din of Hegdish. So Hegdish is by the fourth time it's mutter, and by Meiser, but even by the second time it's mutter. Only by the second time it's mutter. Says the Gemara, Raminu, I'll ask you a contradiction. The Brisa says, Shall Hegdish lo'olam aser. And Hegdish, if it's great waste of Hegdish, no matter how many times you do it, even if you do 10 times, the water is always going to remain aser. But Shal Meiser Sheni lo'olam mutter. It's always mutter. So this Brisa seems to go more strict on Hegdish and much more lenient on Meiser Sheni, which is right away mutter, even the first time you do it. Kashi Hegdish, Kashi Meiser. Hegdish is contradicted from Hegdish, and you have a difficulty from Meiser to Meiser. This Brisa disagrees with the previous Brisa. Answers the Gemara, it's not such a disagreement. Hegdish like Kasha. For Hegdish, it's not a difficulty because the two Brisas are dealing with two different types of Hegdish. Kam, the second Brisa, is dealing with Kedusha Saguf. It's talking about the grapes, the grape waste itself had a Kedusha to it. Let's say this was Kadosh, it itself was Kadosh, that you use to make the wine of the libations. So then it has a Kedushas on its essence, and therefore it forever will always be Aser. No matter how many times you do the process, the water that comes out will always be Hegdish water. Kan, our Brisa is talking about the Kedushas Daman. You have grapes that it itself is not Kadosh per se, that it was Mizbeach type of grapes. It was grapes waste that belonged to Hegdish. The value of it belonged to Hegdish. There are two types of things that Hegdish could own. Hegdish could own an animal that's used for a carbon, that's called Kedusha Saguf, and Hegdish could own, let's say, a hammer, which is not something used in the service, but it's a tool belonging to Hegdish. The value has a din of Kedusha. So if the grapes itself were not a Kedusha Saguf, but its only value was holy, so then we can go lenient, and that's the previous Brisa that the first three times is Aser, but the fourth time already it's mutter. It's not Aser forever. And now the Gemara answers, Ma'aser Amasa Nami Lo Kasha. Ma'aser is not a question. Kan b'Ma'aser Vadai. Ma'aser Sheni, which you know for sure it's Ma'aser Sheni. So then the first time it's Aser, and the second time it's mutter. Ukan b'Ma'aser Demai, but the Brisa that says right away Ma'aser Sheni, the process is mutter. It's talking about Ma'aser. It's a suffix if you have to give off Ma'aser. Maybe it's produce you bought from Amaretz, and Amaretz says I gave off Ma'aser. So you really min hadin, the Rabbanan said you should really try to take off Ma'aser Sheni again. But since it's only in doubt that it's Chai v'Ma'aser Sheni, you can be lenient and say that if you did this process with this Damai type of produce, grape waste, then right away the water is mutter. Another thing, the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Rabbi Yochanan said, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Kederech she'amar li'inyan surah. Just like we have this machlokes, whether it's aser or not. Let's take truma. The first time you did the process over a grape waste of truma, the water that comes out has a din like wine, and it's aser. The second time also. The third time we say it's water. So the Rabbi Yochanan said that just like you say this concept regarding Isser, kach amr linyan hechsheran, then that differentiation will mean that defines it also, whether you define it as wine or water, will apply also if it could make like fruits susceptible to tumah. We know that if you pick a fruit off the tree, you can't be metama it, okay? It cannot become tameh unless it comes first in contact with water. We learned this concept a number of times. First, it has to touch a liquid, and the liquids could be blood or oil or anything like that. And then, only then, the item of the fruit can become susceptible to tumah. Because the Torah says that right when you pick something off the tree, it doesn't become tameh, even if it touches a sheretz. Only it has to come in contact with a liquid, and then, only then, it could become tameh. It becomes tameh. So the Gemara understood that it makes a difference to know what this water is. If you consider it wine, it could be machshir. It could make a fruit susceptible to tumah if it comes in contact with that fruit. And if it's water, maybe it cannot make this a fruit susceptible to tumah. So it depends. If the first two times you consider it wine, then it's machshir. If the third time it's considered water, it would not be machshir. It would not make anything susceptible to tumah. So the Gemara asks, to make something susceptible to tumah, it doesn't matter if it's called wine or water. We know that there are 7 liquids that can make a fruit susceptible to tumah. And the way to remember it is yad, shochet, dam. Yayin, dvash, shemen, cholav, tal, dam, mayim. So dvash, mayim. So there, the mayim, water, is one of the liquids that can make something susceptible to tumah, and wine also. So maya, even if you consider it water, achshuri machshiri, it can make something susceptible to tumah. Chamra, if you consider it wine, achshuri machshiri, it can also make something susceptible to tumah. So what's the difference to know if it's considered water or considered wine? No matter what, whether you define it as water or wine, it's going to make something susceptible to tumah. Answers the Gemara, leitzricha shetomoroi b'mei geshamim. You made it the way the mead was made. It was made with rainwater that poured into this on top of the grape waste, and rainwater, as long as you did not, think about it and put it into if a human didn't touch it, rainwater is not machshir tuma. You see, unlike wine right away could be machshir something, make something susceptible to tuma. Rainwater, if it just rains on a fruit, right, then it doesn't make it susceptible to tuma. It has to be water from a cup. So therefore, what made this liquid, what made this mixture, this grape flavored water, was rainwater that fell on the temed, on the grape waste, and therefore, perhaps it would not be machshir something to be mikabel toma. Says the Gemara, why not? Since once it fell onto the grape seeds for the third time, the kiva, the kashakal, v'ramei. First, the rainwater. You took the rainwater and poured it on top of the grape seeds. So achshavinu, then you made the rainwater into regular water. So it's water that could be make something susceptible to tumah. And says the Gemara, like no, the rain fell directly onto the grape waste, and that's how this temed was made. Says the Gemara, but still, the kavid the konaget kama achshavinu. Once you take it from on top of the grape seeds, the water that's on top of the grape seeds, and pour it into another cup, you made it into, even if you consider it water, because it's the third time you did it, right? The first 2 times you did it, it's wine. The third time that this rain fell onto this grape seeds, and you poured it, even if you consider it water, but the fact that you took it and poured it into another cup, so it makes it into water, it's considered to be water to make something susceptible to tumah. So again, there's no difference to know whether if you define it as wine or define it as water. Papa said the example is rishon. The cow is drinking it. In other words, rain fell on top of grape seeds, the cow drank it up. So we consider the first time it's wine. The second time this happened and the cow drank it up, it's considered wine. The third time that the rainwater fell onto the grape seeds, a cow started drinking it. Now, humans didn't touch it. And from the cow's mouth, the water fell onto an apple. So since it had no contact with humans, and because we define it the third time as water, it would not make it susceptible to tumah. But the first 2 times, even when the cow is drinking it, the water that comes out has a din like wine, and therefore, if it would fall onto a fruit, it would make it susceptible to tumah. And that's the difference. What Rabbi Yochanan said, Kederach Shamalin Yisurin, that's the halacha also regarding to make something susceptible to tumah. Now the Gemara says like this: Amar Rav Zutra Batuv Yamarav, new Gemara. You can't make kiddush Friday night only with wine that's worthy to be poured on the mizbeach. Lemute mai. What is Rav trying to limit? He says grape juice is not good to use for kiddush. That's what Rav is saying. Grape juice you don't pour on the mizbeach, and therefore you can't use grape juice for kiddush. You can't use on the mizbeach grape juice, but if you do use grape juice, it's kosher. Even though the Torah says yayin shechar, but that's only lechatchila. But with the evet, if you do use grape juice as the wine libations on the mizbeach, that's also kosher. Kevin heavy kosher, since if you brought it on the mizbeach, it would be kosher. So then for us, we could use it as grape juice as kiddush wine. The Amar, we go to Amid Beis. The Amar Rabba said, Soichid Odom Eshkel Shelanavim, the Amar Olav Kiddush Hayom. A person can squeeze grape juice and make Kiddush. So, right, if a person's like in a bind and he doesn't have wine, he should take grapes, whatever, and before Shabbos, squeeze it and then make your little grape juice. And from that, you can make Kiddush. So, why did we say, what is Rav trying to exclude? Wine that cannot be used on the Mizbeach, you should not use it for Kiddush. Is he trying to limit that you can't use the wine that's foaming on top of the barrel or the wine that's very on the bottom of the barrel next to the sediment? Well, Rab Chia said, those things are kosher to be brought on the Mizbeach. And since they're kosher to be brought on the Mizbeach, but the Evid, you shouldn't use it. But since it's kosher to be brought on the Mizbeach, so therefore, it could be used as Kiddush. Hello, what Rav is trying to say, you shouldn't use the following. Yain kushi, black wine. Somehow, I don't know how you get black wine. Boirik, or white wine. We'll learn more about that in a moment. Helistain, which is very sweet wine, but very low alcohol. Shelmarte, or of a wine cellar, which you might think that it may have started to smell. It started to turn into vinegar, but we're not sure. Sheltzimukim. Maybe you shouldn't use wine made from raisins, dried raisins. So all these things, Rav says, don't use them for Kiddush. Says the Gemara of Hatanya, we learned in the Brisa of Kula Leyavi. All these things you can't use on the Mizbeach. Bimhevi, if you do use them on the Mizbeach, kosher. It's kosher for libations. So if it's kosher for libations, it should be kosher for Kiddush. So what can't you use for Kiddush? The Ella, if you want to say, Lemuta Yain Koises. You can't use wine that smells bad, but it tastes like wine, but it's starting to smell vinegary. Or mazuk, it's very diluted wine. Because really, wine on the Mizbeach was very concentrated, very concentrated wine, like a syrupy wine. So maybe Rav is saying, don't use the diluted wine, Megula, or if it was left uncovered overnight. If it's left uncovered overnight, you're concerned that maybe a snake put a poison in there. The shel shemarim, or wine that you like we learned before, that you made it from the grape waste, the sherei or the wine that has a bad smell. You put it into, let's say a bucket that had bleach in it, right? And you emptied it out. Now the wine, even though it tastes like wine, but it now absorbed some of the smell from the bleach. So don't use that. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, you should not use these things for libations. And even if you did, it's puzzle. You can't use them as libations. You have to redo the libations. So since you can't use them as libations, therefore you can't use them as Kiddush. And that's what Rav is trying to teach you. First, the Gemara says, I don't need Rav to teach me this. If he's talking about wine that smells like vinegar but tastes like wine, it's not for sure that everybody holds that's not wine. We learned before, Plukted Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shua ben Levi. On yesterday's daf, it was Machlekes. Rabbi Yochanan held that if it smells like wine, if it smells like vinegar, but if it tastes like wine, it's still considered wine, and you make a Bayer Piyagafen. And since you make a Bayer Piyagafen, you can make Kiddush on it. Rabbi Shua ben Levi disagrees, and he holds if it smells like vinegar, even if it tastes like wine, it has a din like vinegar, and therefore you make a Shahakal. If it's you shouldn't dilute the wine for Kiddush, and you should only use the strong, undiluted wine. Just the opposite. For Kiddush, you should have diluted wine because you could drink it. Aluya, that's better. Any type of bracha that you're making on Kiddush or birchas hamazon, she'em mevarchim ad sheyitin l'soichem mayim. You have to put water in there to dilute it. Again, the ancient wine was very, very concentrated and it was hard to drink. So in order for you to make Kiddush on it, or to use it as benching wine, you have to put water in it. So that's a good idea. If he's telling you don't use for kiddush wine that was left overnight out there with uncovered because you're afraid a snake put poison in there. So kanahi, that's a danger. Of course, you can't use it for kiddush. You can't use it, even drink it. You can't even drink it if you can't. So of course, Rav doesn't have to teach you don't use that for kiddush because it can't be used on the mizbeach. It's a danger. If it's trying to exclude the temed, hey kadami, if you put 3 cups of water and out came 4, that's wine. If you put in 3 cups of water and out came 3.5, that's a machlekes rabbanan acherim whether it's considered wine or not. So what did Rav try to tell you? Because this you can't put on the mizbeach, you can't use it for kiddush. Ella, Rav is trying to tell you, wine, good kosher wine, but you put it into a bucket, let's say, that had bleach in it. Now the wine has like a smell to it. When you put it into your kiddush cup, don't use it because that's not nice. And it's not nice to have a smelly wine for your kiddush. The Iba is saying, Rav is trying to tell you that even if you're using uncovered wine and that you're concerned that the snake, don't use that for kiddush. It's a danger. You're not going to drink it. Even if you sifted it out and made sure you inspected it, make sure there's no poison in there, still, although you can drink it now, don't use it for kiddush. Don't bring something that you wouldn't drink yourself, and you bring it to God, even if something that's second rate. Don't bring it to as kiddush, and therefore, even if you ran it through a sifter, don't use it for kiddush cup for your kiddush. Two more things. Can you use white wine for the libations, not for kiddush, for the libations? Mahu amalei alteri yain kis adam. The best wine to use on the mizbeach is only red wine. And some people extend that even for kiddush, try to be machmer on using red wine for kiddush. And finally, kankana b'sharayim, tana pistois nois umegubrafos. That means you can expect that 1 out of 10 inferior quality jugs are beautiful and sealed with pitch to strengthen them. So then, even though it's not going to last, the buyer has to accept that some of them are not going to last. You buy 10 barrels or something like that, or 10 of these jugs, you can expect that 10 out of 100 are going to be something that's not going to last forever. And a buyer has to accept that. That's just explaining what we learned in the Mishnah. Okay, so ends this stuff.